Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you all for welcoming me here today. I thought I was going to hear about my arrest record, so I appreciate it not going too deep. It's also funny that you mentioned this mayor in England, because I often get emails for Sir Steve Bullock, and no one, including my children, have ever called me sir. So it's great to be here, and I will talk a little bit about sort of what I view as the energy future, and a little bit about the legislature and some other things. I had the opportunity before, and I see Jim Swanson out there, Brent Makoshka, he took me through the Glacier Park of Glendive today, so I had the opportunity to go through the But it's great to join you. Now, the first legislative session had a few surprises for me. I certainly didn't think that I'd be with Jim Peterson from Buffalo, standing side by side, talking about campaign finance reform on Valentine's Day. It was kind of an unlikely pair. I didn't know that I'd necessarily be all the time working with chambers of commerce across our state to try to say, how do we actually create jobs, reform our healthcare system, and make a difference? And I really honestly didn't know that I'd be vetoing as many bills as I did. And I understand that some folks, and maybe even a few in Glendive, Republicans and Democrats, are upset about what happened. It's in between the mayor and his 9 family members, it seems, that everybody that I met said, oh, by the way, I'm the mayor's sister. But quite frankly, I wasn't that happy with vetoing a bunch of these bills either. The State of the State address, when I gave it, and that was shortly after coming in, I told legislators that we had to have a balanced budget. We can't spend more than we bring in, and that was my top priority. And I said, keep in mind that if I pull out my veto pen, it might not be personal. Parts of it are fiscal. So I was not pleased when the legislature left town without adequately doing the one job that the Constitution requires the legislature to do. And that's leaving town, providing me a balanced budget, saying that we're not going to be spending more than we're taking in. They left town and gave me 200 bills, and without the opportunity to provide mandatory vetoes. And the budget they passed spent $21 million more than what we were bringing in. I was forced to pull out the veto pen and cut back some good bills. In total, we had to veto or line item out $150 million of spending and tax cuts. So structural balance is just like as you look at your checkbook. Do you have more dollars in, or are you actually underwater? By the end of that, by the end of $150 million out of a $10 billion budget, we now have $1.6 million of structural balance. So, in truth, across the board, there were Democrats, there were Republicans, there were folks in eastern Montana, there were folks in western Montana frustrated with some of those vetoes. And I said I'm equally frustrated, because I needed you to leave town with the one thing that the Constitution requires. Now, nonetheless, we are making, had there not been this House Bill 218, significant investments in infrastructure in eastern Montana. $16 million in infrastructure development for oil and gas counties through the Treasury State Endowment Program. We ended up overall for the Treasury State Endowment Program putting in $20 million more than what I had initially proposed. To address the needs of school districts in Montana, oil and gas counties, approved $22 million in aid for those districts. It's 39 districts out of 416. Assisted the $2 million in needed workforce training funds that were eliminated by last legislature be restored. We made $5 million available for road construction in communities facing rapid growth. Pension fix that I actually signed into law and worked with Democrats and Republicans for will go right off of the balance sheets A community like Glendive, who now actually has to report what their liabilities are on the pension system, because we actually fixed it, got it back to structural balance, that's about $2 million off of their balance sheet. I was talking to Amy Dinas, and she said, so even in total in that's about $45 million into oil and gas counties that wouldn't necessarily have been there. But she said, we still often feel like we're the rich uncle that gives away the money to all those nasty stepkids. And I think that the stepkids are probably people in western Montana, or I think it's also important that we understand what money then that the rich uncle is giving away. So each year right now we get about $200 million in oil and gas production taxes. That's what's collected in total. Of that $200 million, 50%, half of it, immediately goes back to the counties and the schools that ended up where the oil and gas was produced. There was a new education bill passed this time. It's Senate Bill 175. What Senate Bill 175 will end up doing is saying, of the total amount of dollars you bring in, so if it's $200 million, either 25% or $50 million will end up going back to the local areas for property tax relief. So the $200 million, right now, the state's keeping. Then once you take, the $100 million, give it back here, that 50%, now we're down to $50 million. Senate Bill 175, this education bill, said, all right, of all that oil and gas money and things, we're going to give $22 million back to 39 districts. So now we're down to $13 million that those nasty stepkids are taking. No, my math may be a little wrong on that. Let me double check that. 28 million after you take the concentric circles. So now you're down to 28 million to the 200. You look at the $15 million that we gave directly to the Treasury State Endowment Program. You subtract that out and you're down to 13. We did put $5 million in for construction funds on highways where there's rapid growth. We restored $2 million worker training funds. That leaves about $6 million, or 3% of the overall oil and gas tax revenues that the state is keeping. Now, does that mean then that there aren't real infrastructure needs and we ought to be addressing them here? Absolutely not. There are real infrastructure needs, and as I've said all throughout, if we're really going to plan and look forward to what Montana can become, wherever you are, you need to be addressing those needs to make sure that growth and development can occur. How many folks here are in business? How many of you have borrowed any money? How many of you right now have your whole business just in cash? I may want to have your two businesses. We actually walked in and at the start of the session, we sat down with a number of folks and said, all right, we sat down with representatives and legislators, mostly from Eastern Montana, some from Conrad, and said, right now we have record low interest rates. There are needs in Eastern Montana that are actually more significant than the $35 million that was in 218 that would have gotten us upside down. Let's actually put together that program. So I got DNRC together, DEQ, and we came up with the dollars. We actually came up with what I thought would be the structure to go forward. Said, well, I'm not sure we'll have the money at the end. Record low interest rates right now. Let's bond this work just like we're going to bond construction work around the state. No interest in doing so. I think, so it's not that Helen is keeping all the oil and gas dollars. I don't think that we are. It's not that there aren't some real infrastructure needs, even though we're investing about $45 million. I think we need to go forward and get everybody, Democrats and Republicans, on board to say, how do we address these needs in a way that won't get our budget out of constitutional whack by spending more than we're bringing in? And how do we do it in a measured way to say that really this isn't just about 2013 or 2014. It's what we want Montana, eastern Montana, western Montana, everywhere to look like 8, 10 years down the line. That may require some bonding, some borrowing of dollars. That may require getting everybody at the table. What we can't do, though, and I've already talked to legislators about it, we have to agree on how many dollars we actually have coming in, and we have to figure out a way that they can't leave town with leaving me 200 bills and figuring out how to actually balance the budget that I'd hoped that they would do. So I think that there's still work to do. And there will still be the continued commitment to trying to get that work done. And it's not just one legislative session, it's throughout. Energy bills, so to transition from the legislature, at least the vetoes, which have been frustrating some folks, and I said that frankly they were very frustrating to me too. It was Representative Ankney, a guy who I really like in Colstrip. I told him 2 weeks before the legislative session let out, I don't think that we can do this, because I'm not sure where the money would be. Legislature was just meeting today, trying to figure out, okay, where is that money? How much did we have? And no, we weren't at structural balance. Some folks turn around and say, well, because I also insisted that they left with $300 million in the bank. It's about a 15% reserve. On the one hand, that's $3 million that doesn't, impact your structural balance, but that seems like a lot of money. We had 7 fires in Montana yesterday alone. Right now, what our forests are is usually what it is in mid-June. We can have economic downturns. We can have floods. At the end of the day, I think that Montanans also want to make sure that I'm managing your money the way you try to manage your own, to keep some aside in case something goes wrong, so we can continue to say, even through the Great Recession, there are only 2 states that actually stayed in the black, and Montana was one of them. And if we're going to continue to have good development, that's also what drives bond ratings, that's what drives opportunities for our people.